Hello everyone, I'm Deepak from ArtisChain, but before I talk about me or talk about my company, let me talk about a big problem. And the problem is right here on this slide. As Bob was saying, there is an industry on this planet, the size of which is actually equivalent to, or a little less or a little more than the US economy, the GDP of the US as such. And believe it or not, every year that industry wastes close to $1 trillion. Now, to quantify it at a personal level to you, think of it as $600 coming out of your pocket every year. So maybe if you're like me, a family of 4, maybe it's costing me a Disney trip on a yearly basis as a customer. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about what that problem is, why it persists, why nothing has been done so far, and what are our attempts to actually try to solve some pieces of it. So the biggest question is, what's in a document? So I'm saying $1 trillion. Now this is basically the shipping industry I'm talking about. They usually move around, from a mercantile goods perspective, they move around $15 to $16 trillion worth of goods every year, and they are spending close to $3 trillion every year as the cost of moving those pieces of goods or assets across the planet. Out of that, around 25% of their revenue basically goes into activities which are just document related or documentation related, because this is an industry which is spread globally. You have people all around the world spread across geographies. The trade cycles are pretty high. You know, when you ship something, it doesn't arrive next day like FedEx. It might take 2 months or sometimes 3 months or 6 months to get to the other side of the planet and be in the receiving hands of the person who actually ordered it. So documentation basically is a big piece of the puzzle here, because that represents the who, what, when, where, how kind of questions. And because of these distances, because of the technical, I would say, vintage of this industry, they have no other means to do this except to accomplish it through documents. Now, to further elaborate on this problem, this is what I mean by that. Basically, if you look at it, the ownership, the tracking, the retrieval, the disposal, the modification, or the distribution of these documents is basically the whole cost of documentation. So it's not just that piece of paper. If it's sitting somewhere and you have to retrieve it for looking back into history or something, the money involved in that is a cost. If you have to FedEx it over to the other side of the planet for somebody else to receive your shipment on the other side as the shipment is docking, that's a cost, right? So that way, these all 4 or 5 cycles here basically are responsible for all of that $1 trillion cost to the industry. And it's not adding any value, because this is not their real business. Their real business is actually in those containers, on those ships, or in those products they're generating, right? So this is just an essential cost of doing the business at this point of time, because there is nothing else they can do. So this slide here basically is one of the most simplest, I would say, interpretations or sampling of what goes on when a single piece of asset moves across in the import-export cycle as such. This is the simplest it gets, basically. Anything you have ever received as a customer, which is coming from, say, China or something, this is the least complicated way it got to you. And these are the parties involved in it. As you see, there are sovereign agencies, mostly government, regulatory, legal, coast guards, things like that. They're basically all by themselves. They have their own rules and regulations. They're not bound by commerce. They're not motivated by commerce. They have their own agendas, national security, or whatever else it might be. And as a customer or a consumer, basically, everybody else has to just toe the line. So it's, regardless of the cost, you have to follow what they tell you. Same pretty much goes with the banking system on the other side, because the money is also changing hands as a proxy to that asset. So that's the financial considerations. And then in between are these people, basically. Somebody who's sending something, somebody who's receiving it, and somebody who's actually shipping it to you. So, and these guys most of the time have logistical and financial considerations in their mind, right? So this is, as you see, it's not a simple, I would say, ecosystem, but this is the simplest it gets. It's actually, you multiply it by thousands of times, and that's what these supply chains look like pretty much all the time. Now this is further elaborating a little bit on it. So that single piece of cargo, let's imagine a TV is coming, or a piece of shoe, or like a piece of clothing or something, from China to, let's say, US at this point of time. On an average, you have 27 parties part of it. Basically, it's not just two people, but the one who's producing it and one who's receiving it, or one who's shipping it. There are at least 27 parties or more on an average. The number of document or document types they're generating is 36 plus. Sometimes it goes as high as 70. I have seen 70 plus on an average sometimes when you have some specific kind of cargoes happening. And the number of copies they produce out of these things, because all these 27 parties are communicating with each other. These are mostly one-to-many, many-to-many, or many-to-one kind of relationships happening all the time. You're generating copies like nobody's business, and they're like 270 copies, and this could be this much big of a stack. And the footprint of this stack is, I can just distribute it globally. Actually, I have to distribute it globally, and that is this whole ecosystem. So you start in the middle, that red circle, tiny circle. That's one person with one consideration in that ecosystem, and then it starts exploring all the way to the outside. And if you see in between, as I briefly mentioned about the technical aptitude of this industry, believe it or not, it still lives, I would say, at the best, 60 years in the past. The trade tools, if you go to the biggest shipping in the agency, if you go to the port of Baltimore or New York Harbor or New Jersey, that's where I'm from, you'll see that majority of the time these companies are doing businesses of sometimes billions of dollars, and their IT looks like a printer, a fax machine, an email, and phone calls and Microsoft Office. And that's pretty much the extent of it. There is no fancy CRM, there is no fancy ERP or things like that happening. And this is just people using these fundamental tools, which we all use as customers all the time, and they're using it. So now that tells you, coming to this end as I'm running out of time here, the question begs, actually, we live in this age of technical marvel as such, right? So why this problem has not been solved for the last 4 centuries? The trade actually formally started in 1648, and not much has changed. Whatever was envisioned in those days, that's pretty much what happens. The answer to that question is that 95% of the companies in this space have less than 1,000% of the market. So basically, the long tail of the market represents 95% of the market. Unlike any other industry where you can focus on the head of the market and basically serve that market from top-down approach, and you can institute some changes or standardizations and get some efficiencies out of it. So many people have tried, but this basically is the mountain you hit against. So up until now, the cost of trying to do something here was so expensive that it was not worth it, and that's why you just keep doing what you were doing. Now, with blockchain and coming into this space, this is what is our attempt to actually rethink this to a slight degree. And we are saying basically, what if instead of these documents, which are proxy to the processes or the assets or the value, going to people and spreading globally and incurring cost and efforts on that, what if that thing just stays in the middle and everybody came into it? And that's what basically blockchains are, in a sense, right? So you sit in the middle, and then you have this lenses of regulatory, financial, and logistical lenses, basically, and then everybody is outside, and you're just looking into it. So you have compacted your circle, or your footprint, and your cost, essentially. Now, how we are trying to attempt it is basically by this visualization. Here, the innermost circle and the outermost circle are basically, think of it as these parties involved in it. All the trade which is happening right? It's basically either it's B2B, B2C, P2P, or E2E, or whatever other P's and B's might be there. It's simply impossible to manage or pretend to understand them. Anybody who says, like, we know that business, most probably don't. So we are basically saying you as a person have the best knowledge of your own business network, how you conduct your business. Let us just give you that tool. It's as good as, we don't have to understand technology, you don't have to understand blockchain. It's as simple as just logging on somewhere, connecting to people, instituting your business processes or business network through a set of Legos, and just go on. So I think I'm out of time. This is what it is, and it's basically just a web-hosted software, and it just gives you the ability to actually just log in, fire up your own blockchain, connect to anybody else in the world, put in whatever business processes you want out of box or through your own graphical UI, and then just go on with your business. Thank you very much. Thanks.